Hi, welcome back to OSB Miniature Studio, and this time for the Necromunda Diorama we're painting the Goliath Gangers. Now this is my Goliath gang, the Jank Point Jackers. They're made up from pretty much the standard Goliath kit, mixed in with some pieces from the Stimmers kit and the original Forge World upgrade heads and weapons before they were transferred to the GW plastic kit. So there's some interesting pieces in here, a couple of kit bashes as well, where I've taken one of the chain guns off of a Taurox and combined this with one of the grenade launchers to make a minigun. And I've also used an Age of Sigmar Slaughter Brute to make a Stimmer Goliath Ganger boss. I love the fact that his head is actually the renderized axe head, but with a mohawk added to it. So it's this huge gold skulled boss of this gang. I'm going to talk you through the various stages that I use to paint these guys up, and as always there will be a list of the paints and equipment used in the description below. So without further ado, I begin all of my pieces with a Zenithal Prime. I then start with some contrast and speed paint using mixtures of GW Black Templar and Army Painter Gravelord Grey and High Lord Blue. I'm able to make various navy and very dark bluey black tones, and I apply these to all of the trousers of the Goliath gang. I thin them down ever so slightly just so some of that Zenithal Prime shows through below. So I carefully apply this to all of the pants of the Goliath gangers. For each gang member I use slightly different variations of this mix, so each ganger has a unique tone to their bottoms. Once the speed paint is dry, I come along with some Army Painter gunmetal and go around all of the metal parts of the miniature. I then paint all of the areas of the model that I want to be copper or brass. This Goliath gang work in a refinery tank area, so I wanted parts of their armour to reflect that working environment and have that copper tone. So for this I use game model hammered copper as the base tone. Once this is dry, I come back in with some neat Black Templar and apply this to all of the straps on the wrists, and I also apply this to areas of the weapon that I want to be a plastic or black metal finish, such as the gun grips and some of the main casings of the Goliath weapons. I also apply some Army Painter Gravelord Grey over items such as the magazines. While I'm here, I also take some neat black paint and paint in the barrel and the chamber. I next use some Army Painter Night Scales, which is a black metallic paint, and I mix this in gradual amounts in with my gunmetal, and I use this to do some shading to all of the metal areas of the model, so any recessed shades or to the undersides of all of the metal parts. I next use some model colour bright bronze to edge highlight all of the copper. And then moving on to using some Citadel Skaven Blight Binge and Storm Vermin Fur to edge highlight all of the dark material trousers. And I then take some neat uniform grey from Army Painter and base coat this piping area on all of the Goliath gangers' trousers. I then highlight this using Army Painter Ash Grey. On some of the models I have areas where I want them to look like they've used pieces of Necromunda barricades and terrain to form rudimentary armour. So for this I'm going to paint it in a very similar way to how I painted the terrain pieces that you may have seen in earlier videos. So I start by giving these a base coat of Citadel Dark Reaper before giving them a wash of Army Painter Dark Tone. And then using a piece of hardboard and an old brush, I do a soft overbrush of Citadel Skegadon Scale Green And then using an Army Painter dry brush and some Citadel Fenrisian grey, I do a traditional dry brush to all of these metal areas. I move on to painting all of the straps on the Goliath Ganger's armour and their belts, and I give this a base coat of Army Painter Banshee Brown. Once the Banshee Brown is dry, all of these straps and belts are given a coat of Army Painter Pallid Bone Speed Paint. I then give all of the metal areas a edge highlight using Vallejo Air Aluminium Metallic Paint. This is a very thin paint because it's designed to go through airbrushes, but it's very good at adding very thin scratches with a small brush and adding wear to all of the armour areas. So I go around with a very thin brush, adding various scratches and, as I say, a very sharp final edge highlight. Once the Pallid Bone has dried on all of the straps and belts, these are then given a edge highlight using Army Painter Skeleton Bone. I then paint any areas that I wish to be a red painted metal, such as carabiners or this large wrench weapon on this ganger, with a base coat of Vallejo Black Red. For the armour areas where I want there to be hazard stripes, I give these a base coat of Army Painted Desert Yellow. And whilst waiting for that to dry, I come back in and give all of the red areas an edge highlight using Army Painter Dragon Red. To complete the weathering on these red painted areas, using an old splayed brush or maybe even a small piece of sponge, I suggest adding some chips to this in a peach colour. For this I chose Army Painter Barbarian Flesh. I then give all of these red painted areas a light dry brush of chainmail from Army Painter. I next take an equal mix of Desert Yellow and Army Painter Demonic Yellow. I mix this together in a 50-50 mix and apply this to all of the areas I want to have hazard stripes. This is quite a thin paint and I apply this in multiple layers, and then taking a matte black acrylic paint, I then freehand on all of the hazard stripes to these armour panels. Once these are dry, I take a small torn up piece of sponge and some tweezers and I apply chipping using Army Painter Moondust Yellow. For my Goliath Ganger heads, I wanted all of these to be a gold colour. I used various different golds on each of the model, looking for warmer, more bronzy golds for the standard gangers and using brighter golds for the gang leader. Any gangers that had specialist weapons, I used a variety of different golds from various brands, but all of these were given final edge highlights of a silver colour. Before I moved on to painting the piping on their trousers with a base coat of lava orange from Army Painter, and then giving this an edge highlight using Citadel Fire Dragon Bright. I gave the piping a final edge highlight using Citadel Lugganath Orange. For some of these piping areas I used different oranges, including fluorescent orange from Army Painter airbrush range. I also repeated this stage on any of the gangers with mohawks. To paint all of the stim canisters on each of the gangers, I first gave these a base coat of uniform grey before applying a layer of Army Painter Spaceship Exterior. I did this to all of the canisters and all of the pipes. With all of these areas on the models complete, all that was left to base coat was the flesh areas. For this I used the Army Painter Skin Tone paint set. For more tan skin tones I used Jasper, Dorado Skin and Amber Skin. For darker skin tones I used Onyx, Mocha and Tiger's Eye Skin. And for pale, sickly skin tone I decided to use Topaz, Ruby and Opal. So to paint these skin tones I start with the darkest skin tone in each of those triads as a base tone. So on this bronzed skinned gang member, I'm starting with the jasper. But here is an example of each of the gangs painted in those different base tones. Next up, I give the entire model a coat of magic wash. Now, magic wash is a mixture of equal parts Army Painter dark tone, Army Painter flesh tone, and Citadel Lamium medium. I leave this to dry for a day, and then I come back into those flesh tones and I give them a highlight of their darkest triad. So on this tan skin again, I'm starting with that jasper. Now, before I move on to painting the rest of the skin, I paint the eyes in, and I do this just with standard matte white and matte black from Army Painter. I then like to mix the skin tones on a wet palette, so I put a drop of the next tone up in the triad and I mix this haphazardly on my wet palette. I do this for each ganger separately so that each time I have a slightly different skin tone. I don't like having the exact skin tone on all of my models, and this is something I even repeat when I'm painting whole armies or whole units of human toned skin. It's more time consuming, but you do end up with a more natural look to your armies because not everyone's the same tone. So I work my way up, steadily adding more and more of the lighter skin tones from those triads to my mix, taking my time to build this up in many layers before getting to the final edge highlights in the lightest skin tone. I'm heavily inspired for my gang by this cover art from the House of Chains Necromunda book. I particularly like how all the gangers have these like cog tattoos on them. So using a Sakura 0.5 marker in a black tone and a navy tone, and also a Gundam panel liner pen in a grey tone, I went round and gave all of my gangers hand drawn on tattoos in these gear and cog patterns. But to be on the safe side, I leave these to dry for 24 hours. Once dry, I take my lightest skin tone for each of the models and I water this down with 2 parts of water and apply this as a very thin glaze over the top of the tattoos to give them a natural below the skin look rather than looking like war paint that's painted onto the skin. You want a bit of that skin tone to be glazed over the top of each of these tattoos to help blend them into the model. Around any pipes that are connected to the flesh, I give these a wash using Citadel Carabao Crimson, and then taking some Citadel Cola Green shade, I apply a thin coat over all of the stim canisters. For any models with gas masks on where you can't see their eyes, I use an equal mix of Army Painter Speed Paint Zealot Yellow and Army Painter Airbrush Fluorescent Orange. I then weather all of the models using Green Stuff World liquid pigments in light rust, orange rust and turquoise oxide for any of the copper areas. With the light rust, I apply this in small patches to very sharp highlighted areas such as rivets, and the turquoise oxide I apply to all the recesses of the copper areas. I then give all of the models a varnish using equal mix of Lamium Medium and Army Painter Airbrush Matte Varnish. I then use some Hombrel black weathering powder and a soft brush to apply some final grime and grit and dust to these models. And with that, the pieces are complete. Hey guys, many thanks for staying to the end of the video. I hope that this helped inspire your own Goliath Gang paint schemes, and I can't wait to show you the enforcers in the next video. So if this video has been entertaining, has brought a smile to your face, you could return the favour and bring a smile to my face by leaving me a like, share or subscribe. Or alternatively, to see more photos of these models, seek me out on Instagram. And all that is left to say is you are a wonderful person who is definitely destined for hobby greatness. Many thanks for joining me today. I hope to see you all next time. Take care.